faith that stands when the world doesn't understand. There is a kind of faith that cannot be explained by logic, a faith that does not wait for applause, does not require understanding, and does not shrink in the face of opposition. It is the kind of faith that builds when everyone else laughs, that stands when everyone else walks away, that obeys when the instruction makes no sense to the world around it. This is the faith of Noah, and it may be the faith that God is calling you to walk in right now. Let's go back to the beginning. The Bible tells us in Genesis that the earth had become corrupt. Wickedness filled every corner of society. The hearts of men were continually bent toward evil, and yet, in the middle of that darkness, there was one man who found grace in the eyes of God. One man who still walked with God when the rest of the world had long stopped listening. That man was Noah, and God came to him with an instruction that would have seemed absolutely impossible. Build an ark, a massive vessel, on dry ground, with no flood in sight, no visible reason to believe that what God said would actually happen. Now stop and think about what that must have looked like to the people around Noah. Here is a man building a boat in the middle of nowhere, warning people of a flood that had never come before, preaching righteousness to a generation that had no desire to repent. Day after day, year after year. The laughter must have been loud. The mockery must have been constant. But Noah kept building. Faith in God will sometimes cause collision with society. That is not a popular message. We live in a world that tells us faith should make life easier, that God's blessing means comfort and acceptance, that walking with God should open every door and earn every approval. But Noah's life tells a very different story. Noah's faith made him stand out in a world that had no interest in God's warning. While others mocked, Noah obeyed. While others followed the crowd, Noah followed God's voice. While society grew comfortable in its sin and its noise, Noah built according to a divine instruction that made absolutely no sense to those around him. And that is still true today. Faith does not always align with culture. Sometimes obedience will attract criticism, misunderstanding, and rejection. What God calls wisdom, the world may call foolishness. But here is what I want you to understand. The pressure you feel to conform, to quiet down, to shrink your faith so that it becomes more acceptable to those around you, that pressure is not new. Noah felt it too. Every prophet felt it. Every reformer, every person of faith who dared to believe God over what their eyes could see, felt that same weight. And yet they kept going. Noah spent years building the ark, not days, not weeks, years, while holding on to a word from God while the world around him gave him every reason to quit. He chose obedience over approval. He chose purpose over popularity. He chose God's promise over public opinion. And that choice cost him something. It cost him the comfort of belonging. It cost him the ease of being understood. It cost him the comfort that comes from having everyone agree with you. It gained him a place in the Hall of Faith, remembered thousands of years later as a man who trusted God completely when trust was the hardest thing to hold on to. Now I want to speak directly to you. Maybe you are in the middle of building something that people don't understand. Maybe you stepped out in faith and the response you received was not encouragement. It was confusion. It was dismissal. It was people telling you that you are wasting your time, that you are chasing something that isn't real, that you should be more realistic, more practical, more like everyone else. Maybe God has given you a vision that looks ridiculous right now, and you are standing in the gap between what God said and what you can currently see. That is exactly where Noah stood. If God has called you to build something, keep building. If God has called you to stand, keep standing. If God has called you to obey, keep obeying. If God has called you to believe, keep believing, even when the evidence hasn't arrived yet. Because the same God who instructed Noah is still faithful today. The God who gave a seemingly impossible word and then backed every single syllable of it with sovereign power, that God has not changed. His faithfulness does not expire. His promises do not fail. And his timing, though it may feel slow to us, is always, always perfect. Do not measure your calling by society's acceptance. Measure it by God's approval. Do not let the silence of waiting convince you that God has forgotten. Do not let the laughter of critics convince you that your faith is misplaced. Do not let the slow pace of progress convince you that the promise is not real. Noah did not stop building because the promise was taking too long. He kept his hands to the work that God had given him, and he trusted that God would handle everything else. The crowd laughed until the storm came. When the waters rose, every voice that had mocked Noah suddenly remembered his warning. When the flood arrived, every person who had called him foolish would have given anything to have listened. The very thing they ridiculed became the only thing that could save them. Do not despise the season of building. Do not be ashamed of the assignment God has placed on your life. Do not shrink your faith to make it easier for the world to digest. Because there is coming a moment in your life, in this generation, when everything God has said will be proven true. And on that day, you will not wish you had listened to the crowd. You will be grateful that you listened to God. Stay faithful. Stay obedient. Keep building what God has placed in your hand. The storm is coming, but so is the covenant, so is the rainbow, so is the glory of God that follows every season of faithful endurance. You are not building alone. The same God who walked with Noah walks with you. The same Spirit that sustained him in the years of ridicule will sustain you in your season of waiting. And when the time is right, God himself will shut the door, just as he shut the door of the ark. And you will know that your faithfulness was never in vain. Stand firm, build boldly, trust completely. Because faith that stands when the world doesn't understand is faith that God has always honored.